Halloween night had finally arrived. My best friend Logan and I were eagerly preparing for a night of trick-or-treating in our neighborhood. We had our costumes ready, bags for candy, and a plan to cover every house on our block. The excitement was palpable as we ventured out into the crisp autumn air, our footsteps echoing in the quiet streets. As we strolled through the dimly lit streets, we couldn't help but marvel at the spooky decorations adorning our neighbors' homes. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered with eerie light, fake cobwebs clung to porch railings, and skeletons hung from trees. Halloween was a magical time when our ordinary neighborhood transformed into a haunted wonderland. But our adventure was about to take an unexpected turn. Just a few blocks from my house, we bumped into our friends Charlotte and Connor. Charlotte was a wicked witch, and Connor was a goofy-looking mummy. We exchanged excited greetings and decided to join forces for the rest of the night. The four of us continued our quest for candy, hitting up house after house and reveling in the treats that filled our bags. Apart from our group's laughter and chatter, our neighborhood was eerily silent. Having completed trick-or-treating at all of the homes in our neighborhood, Connor wasn't prepared for the evening to end. He ran up the driveway to a house that had long been vacant. "Don't bother with that one," I said. "Nobody lives there." Connor laughed and said, "Well, then they won't mind this," as he banged on the door and hollered, "Trick or treat, trick or treat," and then pressed the doorbell continuously. The rest of us laughed as Connor continued to beat on the door. But our laughter quickly turned to nervousness when, to our horror, the door creaked open slowly. A chill ran down our spines as we saw nothing but darkness beyond the threshold. Then, a deep, gruff voice emerged from the blackness, sending shivers down our spine. "What's your problem, you little a-holes?" Startled and alarmed, we stumbled over our words, apologizing in a rush as we began to walk away. The air grew tense and our hearts pounded in our chests. Connor let out a nervous laugh when suddenly we heard the rolling garage door open and a jingling noise like the sound of a dog's collar. Out of the corner of our eye, we spotted a massive, shadowy figure lunging from the garage. A ferocious dog burst forth, barking wildly and looking as though it wanted to tear us apart. Panic washed over us as we broke into a sprint, clutching our candy bags for dear life. The dog was relentless, snapping at our heels as we swung our candy bags at it to keep it at bay. We didn't stop running until we reached my door. Breathless and terrified, we turned around, but the dog was gone. We recounted our harrowing experience to our parents, who were equally alarmed. They knew that no one had lived in that house for years. They decided to investigate the mysterious house, and their discovery left them just as puzzled as us. The door was ajar, and the interior was shrouded in darkness. The unsettling discovery prompted our parents to call the police, who arrived promptly to investigate. After a thorough search, the police determined that someone had indeed been in the abandoned house, but their identity remained a mystery. No one knew who they were or why they were there. Our neighbors never saw anybody come and go from that house. The unsettling events of that Halloween night left our neighborhood with an eerie sense of unease, and the mysterious house became a topic of hushed conversations for years to come. As Halloween came and went in the following years, we always made sure to stick to the well-lit, candy-filled houses, avoiding that ominous house with the dark secrets that still haunted our memories. Halloween during my time at school, there was something seriously weird and unsettling that happened. It all began when we arrived at school, excitedly wearing our costumes and masks. The morning was filled with laughter and spooky fun as we walked around the playground showing off our creative costumes. But as the morning wore on, a sense of unease started to creep in. It was during morning recess that things took a disturbing turn. I was hanging out with my friends near the soccer field when I first heard the whispers. Kids were talking about someone in a terrifying costume and mask lurking around the playground. I couldn't resist the urge to check it out for myself. As I approached the swings, I saw them. A figure covered head to toe in a dark, tattered cloak, with a mask that looked like a grotesque, twisted version of a clown's face. The mask had hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. It was so unsettling that even from a distance, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The figure moved with an eerie grace, darting between the swings and the slide, occasionally stopping to point at random kids and let out a bone-chilling cackle. Panic started to spread among my friends. We didn't know who this person was, and they certainly weren't part of the normal Halloween festivities at our school. Some brave kids approached the figure, trying to guess their identity. They named various teachers who they suspected were underneath the mask, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, they continued the sinister game, scaring kids in the most unexpected ways. One moment they'd be hiding in the bathroom, and the next they'd be lurking in quiet hallways. It wasn't long before the frightened kids went to their teachers and complained about the scary figure. The news quickly reached the principal's ears, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. He strode through the hallway with an air of authority, determined to unmask this unsettling figure. The principal cornered the masked intruder in one of the empty hallways towards the back of the school. He demanded that they remove their mask, but to everyone's shock, the figure refused. They stood there, motionless, as if the mask were glued to their face. The principal's voice grew stern, and he repeated his command, but still the figure refused. As more and more children and teachers started to peer out of their classroom doors, in a swift, unexpected move, the figure bolted past the principal and ran towards the front exit. The principal and a few teachers gave chase. The figure made it out the front door, and then it seemed like they disappeared into thin air. School staff searched the playground and the parking lot, but there was no sign of the masked intruder. The school went into lockdown mode as everyone wondered who this person was and why they had invaded our Halloween festivities. The police were called, but they couldn't find any trace of this mysterious intruder. Meanwhile, the school decided to check attendance records to make sure all students were accounted for. As they went through the records, it became painfully clear that no one matching the description of the intruder belonged to our school. Every student that was absent had a reason, and their parents verified that they were with them. It was as if the masked figure had appeared out of nowhere. Rumors and speculations ran rampant among the students and parents. Some believed it was a prankster from another school, while others thought it might be something more sinister. Halloween took on a new level of dread that year, and many of us couldn't shake the feeling that we had encountered something truly ominous. To this day, no one knows who that masked intruder was or where they came from. It remains a spine-chilling mystery, a Halloween tale we recount with a mixture of fear and fascination. And every Halloween, as we put on our costumes and masks, we can't help but wonder if that eerie figure might return, lurking in the shadows once more. My name is Thomas, and when I was just 11 years old, something truly spooky happened to me and my friends on Halloween night. We were out trick-or-treating in our neighborhood, dressed up as all sorts of ghouls, witches, and superheroes. It was an exciting night, and the air was filled with laughter as we went from house to house collecting candy and enjoying the eerie decorations. We couldn't help but feel the thrill of the holiday. But as the night wore on, we decided to explore a different part of our neighborhood, one that we weren't as familiar with. That's when we saw him, the police officer. He was standing under a flickering streetlight, his uniform crisp and his badge shining in the dim light. At first we thought he was just there to ensure everyone's safety on Halloween, but something felt off. The way he watched us with his piercing eyes made our skins crawl. The police officer approached us, and his voice was cold and uninviting. He said, "Kids, your parents are looking for you. They asked me to bring you home." My friends and I exchanged a nervous glance. We knew we had been out for a while, but it wasn't that late, and we hadn't received any calls from our parents. The officer's request seemed strange, and a shiver ran down my spine. Why do our parents want us to come home?" my friend Avery asked, her voice trembling. The officer's lips curled into an eerie smile, and he replied, "Oh, they didn't say. Just asked me to make sure we get you back safe." We hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then the officer gestured for us to follow him, and that's when things took a chilling turn. Instead of leading us in the direction of our houses, he started walking the opposite way. "Excuse me," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "Our houses are that way." The officer turned to us, his smile never fading, and said, "Oh, I parked my car in this direction. It'll be quicker this way." As we walked further from our neighborhood, a feeling of dread washed over us. The streetlights became scarcer, and the houses grew more distant. We began to suspect that something was terribly wrong. It was Halloween night, but the atmosphere had turned from spooky to downright terrifying. Then we saw it, a van parked in the shadows. Its windows were tinted, and it looked like the kind of van you'd see in the movies when something sinister was about to happen. The realization hit us like a ton of bricks. This was not a real police officer, and we were in grave danger. Fear gnawed at our insides as we exchanged frantic glances. Without a word, we turned and bolted in the direction of our houses, running faster than we ever had in our lives. We could hear the fake officer's angry shouts behind us, but we didn't stop until we reached the familiarity of our street. Grasping for breath, we finally slowed down and looked back. The van and the officer were nowhere to be seen. It was as if they disappeared into thin air. We didn't go to my house right away. Instead, we gathered at Avery's house, which was closer. Huddled together, we recounted the horrifying encounter. We realized just how close we had come to a nightmare, and gratitude washed over us like a warm blanket. Avery's parents called the real police, and they arrived at her house shortly after. We told them everything about the fake officer, the van, and the fear that had gripped us that Halloween night. They assured us that they would investigate the incident thoroughly. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood, and other kids came forward with similar stories. It turned out the fake officer had been targeting children all over town, using Halloween as a cover for some type of sinister plans. To the best of my knowledge, the police never caught the imposter. It was a Halloween we would never forget. A night when the line between trick and treat blurred with something much darker. But we learned a valuable lesson that night: to trust our instincts and to stick together, no matter how spooky things might get. One Halloween about 10 years ago, when I was still in college, my boyfriend Jake and I had planned to attend our college Halloween party. Our relationship had its up and downs, but somehow we always found our way back to each other. The party was something that our college was known for. Jake was dressed as a werewolf and I was dressed as a devil. When we arrived, the campus was decked out with Halloween decorations, and it felt like it was going to be a good night. At the bar, the music was loud, people were dancing, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. I can't remember what it was about, but Jake and I got into one of our arguments on the dance floor. This argument seemed to feel more serious than our usual disagreements. Frustrated, I watched Jake storm off and noticed him talking to a girl dressed as a vampire. She was captivating, with red lips and a seductive vibe. Jake and the girl talked animatedly, but something seemed off. He looked different, like he was under the influence of something stronger than alcohol. If I'm being honest, I was pissed. If he wanted to be with someone else, that was his prerogative, and at that moment, I didn't really care. But then my concern started to grow as out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jake stumble and almost fall. Our friends, too, had noticed and started whispering about him. They thought that I should take Jake home, and I eventually agreed because something was seriously wrong. Reluctantly, I went to Jake and the vampire girl, feeling uneasy. I tried to get him to leave, but he resisted, and the girl's grip on him tightened. She seemed strange, and her smile disingenuous. I kept insisting that we should leave, but Jake's behavior got even stranger. He suddenly went limp in my arms, and the vampire girl let go of him. I told my friends that Jake had too much to drink and we needed to get him home. With their help, we got Jake outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with that girl. As a friend and I walked Jake back to campus, we noticed that there was a car that seemed to be tailing us, driving very slow and staying just far enough away that we couldn't see who was driving. As we turned a corner to head to our dorm, the vampire girl met us on the sidewalk. Her fake smile seemed even more sinister as she reached an arm out to Jake and said, "Come on, let's get out of here and have some fun." Jake looked up and, meeting our eyes, started to pull towards her. My friend and I held firm, and I told the girl in no uncertain terms was Jake leaving with her. Her face twisted and she became angry. Her smile vanished. Looking through us to something beyond, in a cold, dark voice, she said, "Come on, Jake. This is your last chance. I thought you wanted to have a good time. As tensions escalated, we were approached by a campus security guard who noticed something off. As the security guard approached, the girl huffed and walked away. We heard the car behind us pull a Yui and squeal away in the opposite direction. Campus security asked if Jake was all right, to which I said, I don't think so. They offered to call an ambulance, and my friend and I agreed that that was the best course of action. Later that night in hospital, the doctors told us that Jake had ingested some type of a potent sedative, something that was often used to drug unsuspected victims. Jake had to have his stomach pumped, and they monitored him overnight before he was released back to the dorm. In the following weeks, we asked our friends if anyone knew who the mysterious vampire girl was from the bar, that no one knew who she was, and no one had seen her since. Jake doesn't remember anything about that night, but my friends and I are sure that something sinister would have happened if he would have left the bar with her that night. My name is Emma, and each year on Devil's Night, my family became the target of increasingly disturbing pranks. It all started innocently enough, with toilet paper hanging from our trees like eerie cobwebs. But as the years have passed, these pranks have grown darker and more sinister, casting a shadow over what should be a festive time of year. It was the first time I noticed it that really set the tone. The morning after Devil's Night, I stumbled to the window. Half asleep, I stumbled to the window and saw our front yard adorned with toilet paper. At first I thought it was just a harmless prank from some neighborhood kids. We cleaned it up and laughed it off. The following year, things escalated. We woke up to find our house and car pelted with eggs, their slimy residue dripping down our windows and doors. That's when we started to worry. Who would want to target our family like this? We were just regular people trying to enjoy the Halloween season. As Devil's Night came around again, we braced ourselves for what might come next. This time, someone rang our doorbell and sprinted away, leaving us bewildered in the dimly lit doorway. It was unnerving because we couldn't see who it was. Still, we thought it was a harmless prank. However, we still considered that this must be the work of harmless pranksters. But then, the climax of terror arrived. On the night before Halloween, I carved a jack-o'-lantern with my daughter, and we placed it on our front porch. But the next morning, we found a gruesome surprise. Knives were driven deep into the pumpkin's flesh. It sent shivers down our spines. The attacks continued year after year, and we couldn't figure out who was behind them. We installed security cameras, but somehow the pranksters seemed to avoid them. We even considered moving. The fear of the unknown was paralyzing. Last year, some neighbors banded together with my husband and set up a stakeout sitting in our garage, keeping an eye on things and making sure nothing happened. Turns out the pranksters are cowards. Nothing happened that evening. My husband said they heard a car squeal away at one point, but they're not sure if it was related to the pranksters or not. The guys are going to sit out next year again. It's a shame what it takes to make it stop. We honestly can't figure out why we are being targeted. The anxiety and dread of each Devil's Night is becoming unbearable. In the weeks leading up to Halloween, our family becomes tense, suspicious, and anxious that something bad is going to happen. As we approach this year's Devil's Night, we're even more disturbed than ever. We don't know who our tormentor is or why they've chosen us as a target. We're desperate to find a way to stop these attacks and restore the joy and innocence of Halloween for our family. But until then, we'll be watching, waiting, and hoping for an end to these terrifying annual rituals.